Welcome back to the Students for Liberty Conference. Now, defense. We're libertarians. We think government less, but defense is something the government is supposed to do. But should it do so much? Should we have our troops in so many countries? Should we be in Afghanistan, Iraq? Now they're talking about us going into Iran. Ambassador John Bolton says we maybe should spend more. Why?
Because the purpose of a defense budget is to protect the United States from threats against us. And I'll say this, as somebody who profoundly believes in individual liberty, the most important way to defend individual liberty in the world is to defend the United States.
All right, but we are spending more adjusted for inflation than we spent when the Soviets had all those missiles pointed at us.
No, actually we're not. In terms of gross national product and percentage of the national budget.
In terms of percentage of the economy, we're not. But the economy's grown. In terms of adjusted for inflation dollars, we are.
Well, but the question is, what is the nature of the threats that we're defending against, and what are the capabilities we need to do that? If you look at the threat of the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, chemical, and biological, turning away from these threats isn't going to solve the problem. The rest of the world isn't going to wait for us to solve our domestic economic situation.
Is the war in Iraq a good thing? Was that right to do?
The overthrow of Saddam Hussein was clearly the right thing to do. He was a threat to international peace and security. Once free of international weapons inspectors and UN sanctions, which he was on the verge of doing, he unquestionably would have returned to his long route of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons.
More than 10 years in Afghanistan. I mean, even I thought it was right to go to retaliate after 9/11. But 10 years, are we winning hearts and minds?
Well, I don't think that should be our objective in Afghanistan, and I think there is legitimate criticism.
It's right that we're there?
Let me finish. Both with respect to Iraq and Afghanistan, that nation building was a failed strategy. But the nature of the adversary we face in Afghanistan is one that's difficult to win in a conventional sense in a short time.
So we should stay there, not pull out, as Obama says he will do.
We don't determine the nature or the extent or the length of the threat against us. We had troops in Western Europe for decades after World War II because of the threat of the Warsaw Pact.
We still have them there. Is that a good thing?
And we could move some of them because now we don't face the threat there. There's no doubt about it. You have to look at the strategic situation.
So why do we have
50,000
50,000 soldiers in Germany?
I would move them, frankly, but I would put them somewhere else, closer to the front line.
And now Iran. Some people say we should attack them before they get the bomb.
I certainly agree with that.
So we should go to... Easy. We should go to war against a country much bigger than Iraq and then pry to be invented weapon from their cold dead hands.
No, of course not. What we should do is strike preemptively against key elements of their nuclear weapons program, break their control over the nuclear fuel cycle, and prevent them from getting nuclear weapons. Let me ask you a question. What is your tolerance for risk of having nuclear weapons in the hands of religious fanatics? My tolerance level is 0.
Well, I don't like it, but Pakistan has them, right? Some of them are.
So let's have
fanatics.
some more. Let's have Iran. Let's have Syria. Let's have Saudi Arabia. Let's have Egypt. Let's have Turkey. How many countries do you want to have nuclear weapons?
None.
The only difference between you and me is that I'd only like one country to have nuclear weapons.
On that note, I invite you students to weigh in. Go. Yes, sir.
Hi, Caden from the University of California, Berkeley. Mr. Ambassador, you seem very concerned with individual rights, but I'm very interested in the individual rights of American citizens. Because of the war on terror, the executive branch now claims the power to detain and assassinate American citizens when checked by the legislature. Could you please comment on that?
Yeah. This is part of a war on terrorism, and it is a different paradigm than robbing the corner grocery store. There's a law of criminal activity and there's a law of war. And in the paradigm of war, which is where these events occur, that sort of activity is perfectly permissible, as it is to kill enemy soldiers. They don't get Miranda right to them, nor should they.
Does that mean that anyone that the Pentagon and President Obama says is a threat, They could be killed.
Of course not. You have to be able to demonstrate that somebody has taken up arms against the United States or is in a state of war against them. And that is what the military commissions are designed to demonstrate. If somebody says, somebody in this audience gets picked up, you have the opportunity to demonstrate you're not against the United States. But if you're in the front line in Afghanistan fighting with the Taliban, you have forfeited your rights under that paradigm.
Hello, my name is Carlos. I'm from the Arizona State University. My question is, aren't we less likely to go to war with countries that we voluntarily and freely exchange with rather than threaten and sanction?
Well, I think it's
And your reference here is Iran, that by having sanctions, we're more likely to have war when goods cross borders, armies don't.
You know, it was a theory written about by the president of Columbia University before World War I that global conflict in the West was essentially impossible because there were so many trade linkages, Europe and America would never go to war again. So he was wrong 100 years ago, and that theory hasn't gotten any better with age. The government of Iran, which is a government of religious fanatics, has demonstrated by decades of behavior since it took power in 1979 that it is a threat to its neighbors and the world as a whole, and that its word can't be trusted. That's how I deal with them.
Hi, my name is Kara LaRose. I'm from the York College of Pennsylvania, and I just wanted you to further comment on how exactly you think that our military and our government can justify that we've had 10 years spent on something that, you know, September 11th was obviously devastating and it did take lives, but I feel like we've spent a lot more money and we've taken even more lives trying to retaliate. And so just like the amount of time, how do you feel that that is necessary?
I'll answer it this way with respect to the Taliban in Afghanistan. They have a saying about us. They say, you have the watches, we have the time.
So we're going to be there for 100 years?
How long will it take to make us safe? You tired of it already? I'm not, because I don't want another 9/11. I don't want another 9/11 for me, for my children, or anybody else in America. And it is our right and our obligation to protect our innocent lives from this terrorist attack. I feel that as a profound moral obligation.
I worry that we're more likely to have another 9/11 because we have troops in their country.
Well, that is the attitude that Gene Kirkpatrick, back in 1984, referring to the Democratic Convention in San Francisco that year, talked about the San Francisco Democrats always finding fault with the United States. And as she put it, they always blame America first. And they were wrong then, and you're wrong today.
Okay. Yes, sir.
In 2009, I deployed to Iraq as a member of 3rd Ranger Battalion. And while I was there, a corporal in my company was killed by a 13-year-old with an SKS. They weren't going after a 13-year-old. I have little brothers, and I also have guns, and if my country was invaded, my little brother would have the guts to defend me if they came to haul me off with a black bag, which is what we were doing. We were black bagging people and confiscating their guns, just being, you know, the jackbooted thugs. And so what I want to ask you, sir, is how do you feel about the concept of blowback? The idea that they're really only fighting us because we're over there, because that's what I saw when I was in Iraq.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I think you've done a grave disservice to the hundreds of thousands of other Americans who served with honor in Iraq, who followed our military law and doctrine, who did not harm innocent civilians, and fought for the defense of this country. And if there are abuses, I'm sure you brought them to the attention of your higher authority. or if you didn't, you should bring them to the public's attention now, because in our country, when people violate our military law and doctrine, they're prosecuted for it.
All right, thank you, John Bolton. When we return, more from the Students for Liberty, and also a comedian, a rare one, who actually gets it. Coming up.